Very Bad at Math is a middle-grade graphic novel featuring 8th grader Verity Nelson. Very, as she's known, is popular, the class president, and a top student in all her classes, except one. No matter how hard she tries, math just doesn't compute for her. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Ahead, we'll explore the book, and I'll talk with the author-illustrator about the inspiration behind it. Hope Larson is a New York Times best-selling multi-Eisner Award-winning cartoonist and comics writer. Her previous middle-grade graphic novels include All Summer Long and Salt Magic. She also adapted A Wrinkle in Time into a graphic novel, wrote Batgirl for DC Comics, and co-created the Goldie Vance series for Boom Studios. She joins us to talk about her latest, Very Bad at Math. Hope, welcome to the Kids Bookshelf.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
Well, I understand that this graphic novel is based in large part on your own personal experience. So tell us about that and how it led to this graphic novel.
So something that the protagonist and I share is that we both have dyscalculia, which is a learning disorder that makes it really hard to understand and to process numbers and math. Most people have heard of dyslexia, and that deals with reading and with letters. Dyscalculia, similar, just for math. And something I always want to impress on kids, especially when I talk to them, is it doesn't mean that you're not smart if you have one of these learning disorders. It just means that your brain works differently than a lot of people's brains do.
And your character in this book, Very Bad at Math, her name is,
it's Verity. Verity Nelson, and her nickname is Verity.
Verity Nelson, so she just goes by Verity. And it's clever then, if you really need to pause after saying very bad at math.
Exactly, yeah. This book had a different title for a long time, and my husband and I always just called it Bad at Math around the house. And I finally asked the publisher, can we change this to Very Bad at Math?
So Very is very popular. She is well-liked. She's class president. She excels at everything except math.
Yeah, class president 3 years in a row, which I think is very impressive. So she's well-liked. She's very successful. She's great in all of her classes. And she has built this sort of perfect life and self-image for herself. And then she starts failing math in her last year of middle school. And it feels like her whole world is falling apart. Student council and being class president is such a big part of her identity. And she wants to be in politics when she's older. So the thought that this could be taken away from her if her GPA falls enough that she has to leave student council is really super scary for her. So I wanted to raise the stakes for her a bit. And I also wanted to think a bit about how her school treats kids with learning differences. Like, we don't want people who are bad at math to be out building our bridges or like working as rocket scientists or anything, but it doesn't seem totally fair that a middle schooler should have to leave something that she's really good at and really passionate about because she's bad at something that's fairly unrelated.
Verity, because she's so good and excels at so many other things, really, has kind of become this perfectionist, and part of her really doesn't want to admit that she has an issue with math and really doesn't want to face it in many ways. So what can you tell us more about her character?
Yeah, she's totally like a textbook perfectionist. And that's something that I can really relate to. I grew up with this idea that asking for help was just like admitting that I wasn't smart enough to figure something out on my own, which is so toxic and so not true. And I always tell kids that it can be really hard and embarrassing to ask for help, but that it's actually a brave thing to do. And that's just the first step in getting to where you want to be and having your life be better, asking for help.
This is a graphic novel geared toward Middle
middle
grade
schoolers.
students. So what age range would that encompass?
Like 9 to 12-ish, sort of in there, 8 to 12.
So you are both author and illustrator, and I want to talk a little bit more about kind of that dual role
Sure.
in creating a graphic novel. But I want to talk to you a little bit more about the issue that you had with math growing up and how that, in part, led to you becoming a cartoonist.
Right. So I was just so terrible at math. I mean, I still am. It's not something that you outgrow. I'm so bad that I really tailored my college education around programs that wouldn't require me to do any math. Like I wasn't going to go study chemistry or be an accountant. I went to art school and I really leaned on my strengths. I've always been good at writing and at drawing and passionate about those. So I was like, well, all my eggs are in this one basket and I'm just going to pursue it. And fortunately, I got some encouragement from Scott McCloud, who is also a cartoonist, at this key point when I was in art school. And he really gave me the push I needed to get onto the path of being a professional cartoonist. I've been doing this for 20 years now, so I'm still in it, still in the comics game.
So you found a path, even though you knew you had this disability when it comes to math, and Verity needs to come to that as well. And she finally, hopefully not a spoiler, does figure out what's going on and get some help.
Yeah, she has this wonderful teacher who, Mr. BG, and he sort of heads up this smaller math class that she's put into when she is removed from her regular math class to get some extra help. He eventually realizes that she has dyscalculia and helps her understand what that is, that it's a learning disorder, and helps her get the tools that she needs to do a bit better, like working with her notes available and maybe wearing headphones to sort of minimize distractions, stuff like that. I was not that fortunate when I was in school. I didn't even hear about what dyscalculia was until I was probably 30, and much too late for middle school math, right? So when I learned what it was, everything really clicked for me. And I was like, oh, well, this explains so much. There was a period in college when I worked as a cashier at a big box store. And if you've worked as a cashier, which I think most people do, you know that you have to count out your drawer at the start and the end of your shift to make sure there's the right amount of money in it and that you're not stealing. And I don't know why I wasn't fired from that job, because I worked there for a few months and my drawer came out right one time, which I know because my manager told me on my last day when I quit.
I'm talking with Hope Larson about her middle grade graphic novel, Very Bad at Math, and our conversation will continue. If you're enjoying this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. In this book, featuring Verity and everything she goes through, what are some of the takeaways? What are some of the life lessons that you hope young readers will take from Verity's story?
I would say I've got 3. 1, it's really brave to ask for help. Don't be ashamed. 2, learning disorders like dyscalculia and dyslexia don't mean that you're stupid. You can be very smart and have a learning disorder. And then 3, you can do great things even with a learning disorder or learning disability. Don't let it stop you. Don't let it make you think that you're less than.
And it certainly hasn't stopped you. You have been very successful in your chosen career. And I want to talk a little bit more about that because, as you well know, often when it comes to graphic novels and other books that are illustrated, there's an author and an illustrator, 2 different people. But in your case, you're both. So do you feel like that gives you a creative advantage?
Yeah, it really does. So what we call that in comics is being a cartoonist. A cartoonist is just somebody who does the writing and the art. So I'm a cartoonist. And I really treat the 2 parts of the job as fairly separate. I find that it helps me to wrap my head around just this gargantuan experience that is making a graphic novel. It's a 240-page book in this case, in the case of Very Bad at Math. So I like to basically start as small as I can with the story and workshop it with my editor. And just it gets bigger with every step. So I start with a log line, then I move on to an outline, which can be like 1 to 20 pages, somewhere thereabouts. And then I move on to a full script where I'm describing what's in every panel and I'm writing in all the dialogue and all the sound effects. And then I start drawing. I like to do it that way because I'm much faster at writing than I am at drawing. The drawing part is the hardest part. It's like the marathon part of making a graphic novel. So I want to know exactly where my story is going. That way I don't have to fix as much, change as much at the end.
I want to also talk to you about, because you've been doing this for a while to be able to see this, but I remember years ago when graphic novels were just kind of coming on the scene, that some people, especially some educators, really weren't crazy about the idea because they equated it to, in their terms, just a cartoon and didn't feel it had literary value. Do you feel like those attitudes have changed over time?
Yeah. When I started, there was this real idea that comics are not real books. They're like, so what? They're fake books? That they're just this gateway that you're using to get to prose. And I think now a lot of educators and librarians have realized that comics and graphic novels can reach kids that prose is not going to reach. Like they're going to instill this love of reading in kids who are too intimidated by sitting down with just like a big block of words. And some of them may go to reading prose after that, and some of them may just really love comics, but it's a different art form than prose is. And it should be and it is deserving of respect in its own right.
And this also kind of ties in, I would think, to the increasing popularity of manga and anime for kids.
Yes. So manga those are Japanese comics, and they're serialized in Japan, and they're just these series that run for like dozens of volumes. And they started to be translated more often in like the 90s, mid 90s, I would say. I got super into them in high school, and that was a big part of me really falling in love with comics and wanting to make comics. They were really expensive back then. So my friends and I would take turns buying a volume in whatever series that we were reading, and we would pass it around so everyone could read it. And I have memories of like sitting with my back against the lockers in the hall at school and reading these manga. These were also a big part of book publishers in the US realizing that kids love comics. And this kid lit comics industry that we have now, I don't think we would have had it if manga hadn't been such a huge thing.
How would you describe your illustration style?
I would say it's cartoony. There are manga influences in there a little bit. It's just been this evolving style for me for like 20 years, the whole time that I've been working. And I really wanted to mix it up a little bit stylistically for Very Bad at Math. So it looks a bit different than the other books that I've drawn. And I've really been enjoying working in a slightly different style.
So what advice would you have for artists/writers or cartoonists, I guess is the right way to say it, or aspiring cartoonists is where I'm going. What advice would you give to them about entering into this area?
Practice, draw lots of comics. Don't let not having the right technology or software or an iPad hold you back from making comics. All you need is some paper and a pencil. I worked on paper for years and years and years before going digital. And it's all about your individual voice. You don't have to be an amazing writer or an amazing draftsperson, an amazing drawer. Comics is the combination of those two things. And the way that you want to tell a story and what you have to say really matters. So go for it.
Very is a very interesting character. I'm curious, is there any chance you'll create any more stories around this character?
I'm working on one now, so here's hoping.
This middle grade graphic novel is Very Bad at Math, written and illustrated by Hope Larson. Hope, thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
If you would like to purchase Very Bad at Math, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. Thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. I'm Dan Skinner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.